Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for your patience. The meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure will now come to order. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Here.
Chairman Roe Moreno.
And I am here. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. This week, we will hear many bills, and in order to accommodate the most testimony possible, each measure will be limited to 15 minutes to hear testimony in support, 15 minutes in opposition, and 15 minutes in neutral. All callers will be limited to 2 minutes, but are encouraged to submit their testimony to our committee in writing to be included in the record for today's meeting and will be uploaded on Nellis. As you know, the building remains closed and all of our meetings are virtual. So in the interest of time, we will move to the first bill that we will be hearing. We'll be kind of going out of order today. Our first bill will be AB 380, which will be followed by AB 429. And I will welcome Assemblywoman Cohen to open the hearing on Assembly Bill 380. Welcome to Growth and Infrastructure, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for hearing the bill, especially the members who have just come over from another hearing. I appreciate your hard work. Once again, thank you, Chair and committee members. This is Leslie Cohen representing Assembly District 29, and I appreciate the opportunity to present Assembly Bill 380, which is creating a responsible energy planning process. With me today are Kyle Davis with the Nevada Conservation League and Dylan Sullivan from the Natural Resources Defense Council. Nevada's clean energy transformation has already begun. During the 80th session, this body unanimously passed the 50% renewable portfolio standard, and Governor Sisolak released a bold state climate strategy just a few months ago. But this transition is not limited to our government. We also see it in our economy, where more than 33,000 Nevadans work in clean energy, a sector that has seen a 40% employment growth since 2017. Nearly 3 out of 5 clean energy workers were employed at companies with fewer than 20 employees, highlighting the role of the industry in supporting small business. There's even more opportunity ahead, but meeting our climate goals is a challenge that requires continuous action to move away from fossil fuels. To achieve the vision and ensure no communities are left behind, we need long-range planning for the future. In short, this bill would require Nevada's gas utilities to demonstrate that future spending on the gas system makes economic and environmental sense. That's it. Contrary to what some have said about this bill, it's never been about banning gas or forcing anybody to replace their appliances. It's about making sure we're planning ahead for the future we want. This planning process is important for all Nevadans. All of us paying utility bills every month, all of us worried about dirty air and rising temperatures, and it's especially high stakes for low-income families. If there's one thing I've heard from constituents over the last year, it's a sense of uncertainty about the future. Can they keep up with rent and car payments after getting furloughed? What about new job opportunities coming their way? If utility bills spike following a heat wave, what are they going to sacrifice to afford it? And just how hot is it going to get? This bill is a response to these concerns that I share. We must find a way to keep energy bills low while transitioning to renewable resources that are better for our health and climate. That's why AB 380 is designed to prevent wasteful or unnecessary gas spending that could lead to rate increases. The bill also includes specific provisions to protect low-income Nevadans whose choices are often limited by their economic situation including exploring barriers these households face in upgrading to more energy efficient appliances that could significantly reduce their bills. In addition, we've incorporated the feedback from many other stakeholders. After extensive conversations with the utilities that would be involved in new planning process, state officials who would assess those plans, industry experts with expertise in these topics, and clean energy advocates committing to meeting our climate goals, we proposed an amendment to the bill to address the varying perspectives and feedback. These conversations are an essential part of the policymaking process, but they're also central to how this bill works. Responsible energy planning involves putting ideas forward, having open and public debate about how those plans impact our communities, and reaching solutions that take all of the factors into consideration. I feel confident that we have made adjustments that maintain the key purpose of the goal of the bill to set Nevada up for an affordable clean energy future, while creating opportunities for all stakeholders to weigh in, both in the policy drafting process this year and in the responsible energy planning process we're hoping to put in place for years to come. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Davis and Mr. Sullivan to walk you through the bill and the conceptual amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kyle Davis, and I appear today on behalf of the Nevada Conservation League. The Nevada Conservation League convenes a coalition of over 20 environmental organizations from across the state, and this bill is a top priority for this session. Nevada has historically been a leader in investing in green energy, and last session, this body passed legislation to focus on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions to get to net zero by 2050. This is an ambitious and necessary goal, and if we're serious about reaching it, we have to develop a smart plan to make progress over the coming decades. Our electric utilities are already taking on these planning efforts, and it only makes sense that gas utilities do the same. This bill will take a hard look at future investments to ensure that they make sense for ratepayers, for shareholders, and for our state's carbon reduction goals. Today, we will go through the bill, working from the conceptual amendment that was distributed to members and stakeholders in advance of this hearing, and which is also available as an exhibit on Nellis. At a high level, this bill now does two things. It directs the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada to launch an investigatory docket into the role of gas utilities in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Nevada, and puts in place a planning process for gas utilities so that the state can make sure that new investments in the gas system make economic and environmental sense over the next 30 years. I would now like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Sullivan, a senior scientist and technical expert with the Natural Resources Defense Council. Dylan has worked on a utility regulation for more than a decade and has a master's in civil and environmental engineering from Stanford and a master in public policy from Princeton University. He will walk through the provisions of the bill and amendment in greater detail.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Sullivan, before you start, I just have one question. This is Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. There are two amendments on Nellis. One is 11 pages and the other is seven pages. Which one will you be working off of, or will you be utilizing both?
Chairman Moreno, Dylan Sullivan for the record. I will be working off the clean version, the 7-page version.
Thank you. You can go ahead. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chairman Moreno, Vice Chair Watts, and members of the committee. For the record, I am Dylan Sullivan, spelled DYLAN-SULLIVAN, and I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I want to thank the committee for providing us the time to present AB 380 and the proposed amendment for consideration today, especially given all the other bills on the committee's plate this week. And I would also like to thank the various stakeholders whose engagement and feedback helped us develop the amendment in search of a common sense solution to the issues that have been laid out by Assemblywoman Cohen. I will walk the committee through the amendment section by section, working from the clean version, the 7-page version, which was sent to committee members and is available as an exhibit online. So I will start with sections 3, 5, and 5.1. These sections of the bill establish definitions for beneficial electrification, end-use equipment, and energy efficiency. These definitions are used in the bill in a few places. First, when gas utilities are making a load forecast for what demand for gas might be in the future. Second, when gas utilities and the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, the PUCN, are evaluating a big new gas project and comparing it to alternatives. And then third, when the PUCN is considering how to protect low-income customers and historically underserved communities from impacts on gas bills of any decline in gas sales. So to be clear, there's no electrification goal or mandate in this bill. The intent in this bill is that beneficial electrification and energy efficiency are analyzed as alternatives to a big gas project. Sections 6 and 8 of the bill define gas and greenhouse gas as they are used throughout the bill. Sections 11 and 12 define historically underserved community and low-income household. We worked on the definition of historically underserved community with feedback from other advocates, and the committee will likely be seeing other legislation this session using the same or very similar definitions. The definition of historically underserved community and low-income household it's based on existing federal and state definitions and data to allow for easier identification of these communities. And it's included here to assist the utility and PUCN in ensuring that their decisions are equitable. These communities, of course, often see disproportionate economic, health, and environmental outcomes, and policy decisions should take those facts into account. Section 15 establishes the policy goals of the state, which are referred to again in the investigatory docket that is articulated in Section 17 of the bill. In the introduced version of the bill, this section, Section 15, generated significant concern and differing interpretations. So we have taken a different approach in the conceptual amendment, an approach that gives the PUCN and the state a general policy direction, which is to comprehensively plan the gas system in a manner that protects low-income households and historically underserved communities, takes into account workforce impacts, maintains safety and reliability, and reduces emissions. Section 16 of the bill is about it's about the resource planning process. So I will return to that section when I talk about the resource planning process. Section 17 directs the PUCN to launch an investigatory docket that covers the role of gas utilities in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the state, how gas utilities can maintain safety and reliability if gas use declines, from customer migration to electric alternatives, and how to best meet the policy goals in Section 15. The Commission has wide discretion to choose topics, but a few are specified due to their importance. So one critical component is how low-income households and historically underserved communities can be protected from rate and bill impacts as Nevadans with the means to do so choose to go all electric. Because technology has changed, more and more people are going to move toward electric heating and cooking for environmental, health, and economic reasons. We see a similar trend toward electric vehicles instead of vehicles powered by gasoline. But the gas system's costs are mostly fixed costs. Once pipe is laid, it's going to remain in place, even if the customers it serves use less or no gas in the future. So because fixed costs are not decreasing as people choose to switch to electricity, the likely impact on gas bills is upward pressure on gas rates and fixed charges. So this provision directs the PUCN to carefully consider this and carefully consider how to protect low-income customers. A couple of options could include special income-based gas rates and specific programs that help these households switch along with others. This ensures that these communities are not left behind bearing the burden of the fixed cost of the gas system. And paragraphs A and B cover this. Paragraph C directs the PUCN to investigate another way to mitigate the cost of any transition, and that is there may be parts of the gas distribution system that are going to need to be replaced soon, but where it might be cheaper to serve customers' needs with energy efficiency, beneficial electrification, and other alternatives instead of laying new pipe at today's construction prices. And this bill, it just directs the PUCN to investigate under what circumstances this might make sense. Section 19 of the bill is the planning process that I referred to earlier. Electric utilities like NV Energy go before the PUCN every 3 years and present their plans to build new transmission lines or bring new renewable power online. They forecast how much electricity demand they expect over the next few decades and compare their plan with alternatives. The commission looks at the analysis and alternatives and can approve, modify, or reject the plan. This section adopts the same basic framework for gas utilities. In subsection 2A, the gas utility is directed to do a demand forecast for what gas demands look like over the next 30 years. There is a base case that reflects the best guess of what might happen to demand, and a sensitivity where the gas utility examines what would happen if gas demands fall from beneficial electrification and energy efficiency. The sensitivity is important because it ensures that the PUCN is considering a key risk of building large new gas projects right now, and that is, how do they pencil out if demand for gas declines? In subsection 2B, the commission is directed to specify the types of investments and activities that the utility is required to bring forward in the plan. The intent here is for the commission to be able to scrutinize discretionary projects as opposed to those necessary for the day-to-day safety and management of the system. These day-to-day issues are already dealt with in the general rate case process and existing law, which we don't alter here. A couple of examples of the types of investments and activities we would like to see included in a plan would be service territory expansions or major pipe replacement projects that are not required for safety. But the ultimate list of the project types that the gas utility needs to bring forward in the plan, that's up to the commission in the rulemaking process. Subsection 2C requires the utility to describe in detail these large discretionary projects it wants to execute over the next 6 years. A detailed description is important because it helps the PUCN and stakeholders understand whether a project is necessary. Subsection 2D requires the utility to compare what they want to do, the plan that they put together, with alternatives to that plan. Two specific alternatives that the utility has to analyze are called out, and the commission can say more about which alternatives need to be analyzed in the rulemaking process or potentially in the docket itself. Again, these alternatives just have to be analyzed. There's nothing that would require the commission to approve these alternative plans. And this is something that electric utilities are required to do in resource planning, to analyze alternatives to what they want to do. Section 2E directs the utility to evaluate the costs and benefits of its plan and the alternatives. So this is where consumer costs would be taken into account, costs of utility infrastructure, and we also specifically mentioned climate and health impacts here. Section 16 of the bill, which I referred to earlier, that contains details on how the planning on how the planning proceeding works and what the PUCN should take into account when it reviews the plan. The basic standard in section 16 is that the commission will apply is whether the forecasts are sound and whether the plan as filed by the gas utility is good for Nevada's economy and environment. The final section of the legislation that I would like to call the committee's attention to is section 22. This section repeals statutes enacted in 2015, which unfortunately removed commission discretion over gas utility service territory expansions. Under existing law, the gas utility was able to expand to Spring Creek, a community near Elko, and put around 90% of the costs, $57 million, on Northern Nevada ratepayers. Under the current law, the commission wasn't able to properly evaluate the expansion, and the bill and amendment in front of the committee would put expansions through the comprehensive planning process in section 19, giving much needed scrutiny. So that concludes my walkthrough of the bill. I would also like to call the committee's attention to NRDC's letter of support for Assembly Bill 380 filed as an exhibit. And I will now turn it back over to Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. This concludes our presentation, and we'll stand for any questions from the committee.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We do have a few members with questions. So we are going to start the questioning with Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you all for the presentation of the bill and the amendment. I appreciate it. One of the things I really appreciate is the work in this bill to define historically underserved communities and make sure that they are factored into these processes and these planning discussions. I'm excited because we've been having this conversation on a few different pieces of legislation this session. I think it's overdue. We've seen that these folks have been left behind in a lot of policies and programs, frankly, including ones to support the deployment of solar energy, energy efficiency, and even electric vehicles. So it's important to think about how we can make these decisions in an equitable way moving forward. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to what you've heard from people in these communities so far and how the communities themselves would be involved under the provisions of this amended bill.
Thank you for the question, Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. I have heard a lot of concern about the bill, and I think that there are concerns generally that some of these climate actions are going to force people who can't afford it to spend money replacing appliances. And, as noted, we've created incentives in other programs, and they sometimes have barriers that make it harder for historically underserved communities to access them. And this can be capital credit, but it can also be how to do outreach and education, languages, that type of thing, and just letting people be in the know. So the intent with the bill is to get in front of this by looking specifically at the ways targeted programs could address those impacts and make sure nobody's left behind. So the communities would definitely be involved, and we want them at the PUC, want them participating.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And again, since a lot of times we've had to try and catch up, I think it's just worth noting that this is something that we're trying to build in on the front end so we don't have to address greater issues moving forward. I just want to express my appreciation. Thanks, Madam Chair, for the question.
Thank you. Next up, we have Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine is just kind of a follow-up on Assemblyman Watts's. Is the senior citizen population, those on fixed incomes, are they addressed in this plan? And you talk about maybe the lower income demographic and their difficulty in transforming from electric to gas, and that there's certain parameters put in place to help that. But so maybe you can discuss in more detail how is that done? Who picks up the tab for that? Because there's obviously going to be a disparity in what they can afford to do, whether they're a low income demographic or a senior citizen on a fixed income. So if they can't afford to do what they need to do to convert over to electric in their residence, so who picks up the tab? How is that done? Can somebody describe that in a little more detail?
Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. So Section 12 has the definition for low-income households, which is not more than 80% of the area's median income based on guidelines published by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And then for the rest of your question, let me try to remember exactly what you said, or let me punt it so that we can get this done quickly. Mr. Sullivan, do you want to go through those details?
Certainly. Chairman Moreno, through you to Assemblyman Levitt, if I may. So I think the first major impact of this bill is that it will give the commission the tools to provide really needed scrutiny on the gas utilities going forward investments. Because of the incentives of rate of return regulation, utilities are going to want to put, lay pipe and lay new pipe. This bill will just make sure that the new things that the gas utility wants to do are cost effective. So the first big impact of the bill will be there on providing needed scrutiny. Really what this bill calls for is really just the first steps of this transition. So it calls on the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada to do an investigatory docket about how to do this transition, how to reduce emissions from our natural gas utilities in an equitable manner. And so this is really, I think just the starting point. But I mentioned some of the things that could be good programs would be special gas rates for low-income customers and specific programs that help customers, when they're already in the market for an appliance, when something breaks, just to make sure that there's an option to switch and that it's available to all types of customers.
Did you have a follow-up?
I do. I'm
Go
just
ahead.
trying to get some understanding of it. So essentially what I got out of that is we're going to force a gas utility to charge someone a lower rate, or we're going to help someone who has to pay a certain rate, whatever it is, in some way, shape, or form to pay that rate. What I want to know is how can we dictate, one, equitably, how we determine what a gas company charges a certain demographic, and two, if we can't get there with that, and we want to ensure that the lower income level, whether it be fixed income, impoverished areas, whatever it may be. So what is the plan to supplement that? I mean, is there, I just am trying to gauge how that even works, because I don't know that there's an equitable way to dictate to a certain company that they need to charge someone less by regulation. And then I just want to know are other taxpayers going to have to pick up the tab if we supplement their gas at some other juncture?
Chairman Moreno, through you to Assemblyman Levitt. Thank you for the question.
If you could just state your name again for the record. Sorry.
This is Dylan Sullivan for the record. It is other states in the country have income qualified programs for providing essential utility services. So this would not, if the commission decided that was a good idea to mitigate the rate and bill impact, then they could pursue that as other states have done. I guess in terms of how this would work, I think there's a good analogy to utility energy efficiency programs where a utility like NV Energy provides incentives for customers to buy down the cost of the more efficient model. And they work with contractors to make sure that contractors just know about the efficient model and have it in stock and can offer it at a good price. And so I think in the medium term, after the investigatory docket, the commission could find that programs like this would be reasonable. But again, this bill is really the starting point, and the big thing it is going to do is to provide added scrutiny on gas utility investments and make sure that we're making the right investments for the long term.
Madam Chair, could I add on to that?
Sure, Mr. Davis, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Kyle Davis for the record. Another thing that I think my colleague makes some pretty good points in terms of programs that we already have in place for electric utilities. We already have programs in place that provide assistance for lower income ratepayers for electric utilities. We already have programs in place that provide those efficiency programs. So those are some of the options that are available. I think the most important thing to consider here is that what we want to do is set up a process so that the Public Utilities Commission can consider this in an open public process where, you know, other groups can get involved, consumer groups can get involved, the state consumer advocate can get involved. So that there's a way to really work through these types of programs that could be offered. We don't know right now in terms of what exactly the programs are going to work best. As my colleague said, there are a number of different programs across the country that they can take into account, but this sets up that process to really consider those types of things.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You are so welcome. Next, we have Assemblyman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the bill presentation. I have a couple questions that kind of goes into what Assemblyman Levitt talked about. I understand the low income and folks on a fixed income. So obviously over time, the service of gas is going to reduce. And so there's less people being serviced. And so those people that are stuck or can't leave or for whatever reason aren't leaving the system, what happens to their bills or whatever to maintain the system to still deliver gas? How does that work?
Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. I am going to ask the other presenters to chime in, but I think the thing to remember is that what we're talking about now is planning, because we know that the changes are coming. We know, like we use the example of electric cars, more people are looking at electric cars. Just like that, more people are looking at electrification. And you could have a situation where there are people who are being left behind. But if you don't start to plan for that, it's going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or 29 years from now, which is the number the state has been kind of looking at for reducing greenhouse gases, but and carbonization. But if you don't start to plan for it, you can't get there. And those people will be left behind with an all of a sudden, what are we going to do now? But with that, I'll just ask Mr. Davis or Mr. Sullivan if they want to provide any more input with that.
Yeah, I can jump in. Thank you, Madam Chair. Kyle Davis for the record. And I don't really have much more to add. I think the Assemblywoman covered it pretty well. The fact is, this is happening based on technology, based on policies. You know, this is a direction that we're already moving. And in fact, I remember that came up during the Interim Energy Committee last year, where where the utility said that they were planning for a future where people used less gas. We need to do that. We need to do that in a comprehensive way, because this is going to continue to happen because of technology, because of the choices that consumers make, and because of policies that are put into place. So, Assemblyman Roberts, you're certainly right that this is something we need to be thinking about, but it's going to happen whether we think about it or not. So it makes sense to plan for it on the front end, and that's really what this bill is all about.
Thank you. A follow-up, Madam Chair, is so I understand that, but what's your anticipation of the plan? So, obviously you guys are sponsoring this bill. You believe there's a need to plan for the reduced greenhouse gases. I mean, what do you think will occur at some point? Won't there be a tipping point to where folks on the system can't afford to stay on the system? And then what happens to the system?
Madam Chair, I can certainly take that again. Kyle Davis for the record. To Assemblyman Roberts, I think that the important thing to keep in mind there is that we don't. Yeah, that we have to act. We have to actually plan for that. In terms of what that looks like, I think Mr. Sullivan talked about some of the examples that could be put into place in terms of programs programs that could be put in. But I think the most important part, and what this bill is trying to get at, is that we don't exacerbate the problem in the meantime, knowing that this is a thing that we need to keep in the back of our mind, that we need to know that that you may have customers leaving the system. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to put a lot of money into growing and enhancing that system if it is just going to be a bill that's going to come due in the future. So that's really what we're talking about, and thinking about this on the front end, is knowing that reality, making sure that we don't invest a lot of money into a system that is going to have fewer people paying for it in the future, so that we can manage those costs.
Thank you. And as it gets reduced, last follow-up, Madam Chair. So these are the people that work on these gas lines and some of the infrastructure that, through our own planning and through the testimony here, is probably going to be cut back over the years. What happens to those jobs? They're high-paying union jobs. And what happens to those? How do we retrain those people, so on and so forth? Is that part of the planning process for the PUC, or is that left to the state government to shore that up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, to Assemblyman Roberts. Kyle Davis again for the record. And again, this is about planning for the future, and it's not requiring that any one reality come into play. But we would anticipate that gas utilities workers such as the 1,000 Southwest Gas employees will continue to maintain the current system, including fixing leaks, for decades. In the meantime, any beneficial electrification or energy efficiency projects that are determined to be cost effective would create new jobs on top of this existing workforce demand. The bill establishes that it is the policy of the states to specifically consider the impact of declining gas demand on utility workers. We don't have all the answers here, but what we want to see is cross-training and other programs to ensure that as the jobs change, workers are able to adjust. And that is called for in the legislation. Thanks.
Well, thank you for the answer. And they'll be working on a lot of leaks because we probably won't be investing in the infrastructure too much. Thank you very much. Thank you for the answers, and appreciate it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman Roberts. Next up, we have Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Assemblywoman, and your support folks for bringing this bill. There's been a lot of debate about banning or expanding gas and what that means for our communities. And, I'm a huge advocate for ensuring that we are appropriately investing in our infrastructure and not leaving it to the last minute, as historically has been a trend for us. But I also acknowledge that even in my own family, the decision to move away from gas conveniences has been a struggle. We, however, have been looking at alternatives and looking at French trained chefs, and they only use electric gas or electric stoves. So, there are dancing alternatives out there. I do also want to say that I'm grateful that this bill is starting to look at the data and asking for a really specific feasibility and analysis of the trends in gas and how that integrates with our advancement on climate change, adaptation, and planning in the future. I also know that there's another proposal for comprehensive gas pipe replacement projects that are linked to the discussion of safety. Can you talk about how that proposal is currently being evaluated and how that safety would be currently factored in their planning process of the bill, along with the other feasibility study impacts, like the financial, health concerns, and climate impacts?
Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. So I'll again start and then throw it to my fellow presenters to see if they want to add anything. I don't think I've ever been in growth and infrastructure before, but I'm guessing that this committee is very familiar with PUC, and there are pipeline safety regulators, and I believe they're also here. They can do some testimony if necessary, but we've got federal laws, and we've got that existing process to ensure that projects are done for safety and that they're carried out immediately in cases of emergency. But our gas system is rated highly for its safety, its efficiency, and this bill just doesn't change it or the process for addressing issues with leaks and other dangers like that. So it's just, basically, and this is somewhat a follow-up to the last statement that Assemblyman Roberts made. It's balancing the gains from the infrastructure and doing new replacement or new infrastructure against fiscal health and climate impacts of the spending. So, we're looking at electrification and efficiency and these alternatives and making sure that we're just being really targeted and over the next several years as we move to wherever we're going to be, we need to put thought into it. So I don't know if Mr. Sullivan or Mr. Davis want to add anything to that.
Chairman Moreno, through you to Assemblywoman Peters, Dylan Sullivan for the record. I guess the one additional thing I'll add is just a little bit more detail about the federal pipeline safety regulations. So the gas utilities are required to file a distribution integrity management plan with the federal pipeline regulator that basically each year they're required to identify those sections of pipe that are most at risk and replace those. And they're also, of course, anytime there's an imminent concern about safety, they have to, gas utilities just everywhere have to address that. And this bill does really nothing to change those existing processes for managing the day-to-day safety of the gas utility. What this bill is really about is, what Southwest Gas wants to do a giant replacement project to spend $3.7 billion, ripping up 7,000 miles of streets to replace pipe that may not be necessary to replace. And what this bill will do is just really give the PUC and the tools to evaluate that investment and make sure that it makes sense for the future direction of the state.
Thank you for those responses. Yeah, I really appreciate the integration of financial security and health and safety and personal health and safety and the health and safety of our children and other vulnerable populations, and the climate safety and health integrated into this proposal.
Assemblyman Ellison, you're next up.
Thank you, Madam Chair our Chair. Thank you, Mrs. Cohen. I'd like to start off with Mr. Sullivan, if I can. I've got 4 questions I need to ask and with different people. Mr. Sullivan, if I could, the PUC approved in all the expenditures and the plans that went into Spring Creek, Nevada, did they not?
Chairman Moreno, through you to Assemblyman Ellison, for the record, Dylan Sullivan, the commission did approve the expansion to Spring Creek, but what's important is that the law that was passed in 2015 doesn't really give the commission the tools to evaluate whether expansion makes economic sense, and it doesn't specify that expansion needs to be compared to alternatives. So what this bill would do would be to basically run expansion through a planning process where gas utilities and interveners would be able to kick the tires on these giant infrastructure proposals and make sure that they make sense. In the Spring Creek case, the gas utility did a customer level cost benefit analysis where they looked at what would be the impact on a customer's bill if if we expanded gas to that community, instead of doing some alternative like staying with propane or using electricity for heating. But the way the company did that analysis, they didn't even consider new cost-effective electric technologies, heat pumps, that could have served those heating needs at actually lower costs than gas. And so what this bill would do is expansion could still go forward and would still go forward if it makes economic sense, but it would just remove existing law that basically allows the gas utility free hand to expand and make sure that expansions really make economic sense. So they could still happen, they would just be more rigorously scrutinized.
Wouldn't the customer have that, the customer's the one that's going to make that choice. They're on propane now, and they did millions of dollars investment to get it out there, and the people are going crazy. They're so happy to get natural gas out into these areas, because some of these areas will have to be on propane for years and years and years to come. And so to me, the PUC should be the people that's going to invest. Do they want the natural gas or do they not? They have an option to say, no, we're going to stay on propane, or yes, we're going to take the natural gas, or we're going to go ahead and switch over to electric. That was a question I've got. And you had a statement, you wanted to know if there was many calls. I've had more calls come into my office in Elko and here than all the bills. So the people are really, really concerned about this bill. So they're really worried about what's going to be in the details. Are they going to eventually lose the gas? So the fear factor come out there, and we're getting a lot of calls. I know the Free Press is going to run an article today about this bill. So there's a lot of concern about the state and what's going to happen. And then number one is Wells, Nevada. Wells, Nevada is that little economy in that town has been destroyed after that earthquake. They have no industry. There's no mining in that area for net proceeds. There's nothing. So they're dying. So now they have a chance to have a company come in there, but the only way they'll come in is under one condition: if they can have natural gas. Period. He said there's no way they could operate that company on natural gas. And then the other thing I was going to say before I switch over is also in some of the areas out there when in the wintertime, it's hard to get into these areas because of snow and mud. So you better have them tanks full if you're on propane, because you might not get gas. So one thing good about natural gas, if it's running all the time, and I support propane, so don't get me wrong. And then I have a business, and Ms. Cohen, is if you can answer this, I have a business that depends on natural gas. If I had to switch over from propane over to, or natural gas to electric, that business wouldn't be financially feasible because all the dryers, all the equipment in there is gas. So to operate that business, it took me probably a third more to operate that business, and there's no way that could work. So I'm hoping you're saying that the gas is not going to be impacted, but we're putting regulations on it where we might lose expansion in the future, and that's probably what scares me the worst. I'm a large supporter of natural gas, and we converted our house over as much as we could to natural gas because it runs clean, it's safe, and it's really economical. But could you tell me, Madam, about Wells, Nevada? I think that's going to have an impact on what's going to happen in the future of that little community, if it's going to survive or not survive.
Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. I'll address some of those issues and then have my co-presenters also give some comments. And I think, Assemblyman, what you said about the calls was really important, because you said the fear factor that you're hearing. And I think we are hearing fear, but I also think that a lot of that is a misunderstanding of what this means and what this bill does. A lot of that I'm hearing from people is that, because I'm getting the emails too, is that people think that we're taking away their stoves in 2023 and that this is forcing a change. And that's not what this is doing. Again, this is making a plan. So when you give an example of your business, let's say, for instance, that the rest of your area kind of moves away from gas, and we're talking in the future. Again, we're not talking next year, the year after, maybe not even 10 years from now, maybe not even 20 years from now. But let's say that the area around you changes or doesn't change, but the people just decide they want to move away from gas, and they're doing things to do that. And where are you? Where are you left now? Because now if there's no plan in place, you're still there with your gas hookup and your business trying to survive, and there is no access for you because of the market changing and that type of thing, which we know the market is changing. So that's something I want you to consider. And with that, I will just ask my colleagues to chime in as well, or my co-presenters.
And Madam, I really appreciate you talking about the fear factor, because I think the education is a big part of this. And a lot of these people think that it's going to get turned off in the next 5-6 years. I said, no, it's not going to happen. But I am worried about the future in some of these areas. If they looked at the gas lines they had to take from Elko all the way to Spring Creek, and what they had to go through to get them lines there was massive. The mountains and stuff they had to go over. But the good thing about it was the city of Elko was there, a breaking ground. The county commissioners were there. The elected state officials were there. I don't know if I thought Mark Amadei was there, but it was really a big thing for people to get gas out in this rural area. It was a godsend. So if you'd have seen the community come to live and show their support, they were really strongly in support of getting that natural gas out there. They might have cost them a few dollars more, but in the long run, they'll benefit. And I just wanted to talk to you about the fear factor. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ellison. Mr. Davis or Mr. Sullivan, did you want to respond in any way?
No, that's fine. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, next up we have Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the conversation and the comments from many of my colleagues. I thank you, Assemblywoman Cohen, for bringing this bill, and your team. I do want to express my appreciation in particular for the consideration for low income and older adults, many who are not going to be able to afford to retrofit, especially those in Assembly District 42. I have a number of mobile home parks that many times cannot be converted because of the infrastructure that they possess. But that said, I appreciate the conversation relative to the fear factor and what might be a misunderstanding. So I have a couple of questions. I hear that this is about planning and ensuring that the gas company can follow a similar process, or does follow a similar process than the electric company does now. So I'm curious to know, can somebody discuss the current planning process that the gas utility goes through? Does the gas company deliver a similar plan to the Public Utilities Commission now, or is that not the case? I heard Mr. Davis identify that you're looking to an open and public planning process. So that leads me to believe that does not currently exist. Is that true?
Correct. So, and then I'll ask my co-presenters if, because they certainly have more expertise in the process in front of the PUC than I do. So if they'd like to kind of fill in those blanks.
Ms. Cohen, it was difficult to hear you in the beginning. Did you say correct at the beginning?
I said yes, correct. But I'll refer to to my co-presenters, because this is kind of the world they live in much more than I do, so they can fill in the blanks about how that works in practice.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Kyle Davis again for the record. And I can give a little bit of background here, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Sullivan. He can give the detail on the existing process and how this would be different. But yes, gas utilities do not go, at least in Nevada, do not go through as much of a robust process as electric utilities. And not just energy, water utilities also have to develop resource plans with long-range projections and efficiency measures. In fact, the 1987 legislature passed a bill, it was SB 449 back then, requiring gas utilities to file resource plans, though this primarily focused on the sources and availability of gas and not on the infrastructure side of things. In 1997, the legislature dialed back the filing requirement to an informational filing, which is what it is today. I note again from the presentation that in 2015, the process was modified to disproportionately favor the gas territory expansions if there wasn't any economic development impact. And so essentially what we're talking about with this bill is that all major utility projects should have their costs and benefits balanced against long-term forecasts and compared with potential alternatives. And that's really what we're talking about with this bill. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Sullivan. He can tell you a little bit more about the current process.
Chairman Moreno, through you to Assemblywoman Brown May, Dylan Sullivan, again for the record. I think the easiest way to understand this is that gas utilities just don't have a single comprehensive process for analyzing long-term large infrastructure projects in the same way that electric utilities do. There are really one-off planning processes, a lot of after the fact review of projects after the utility has already made investments, which puts the Public Utilities Commission in a difficult position because just not allowing recovery of something that's already been incurred affects the utility's finances. It would be much better to put it all in one plan up front so that interveners in the commission can provide needed scrutiny, and the company would have more certainty when it makes an investment that it'll be able to recover those costs in the future. It's kind of interesting to me, like just as a regulatory wonk, like why we haven't had comprehensive planning on the gas utility side. Integrated resource planning for electric utilities really developed as a result of some really bad construction failures and power plant cost increases that happened in the 1970s and 80s. And people realized that maybe we should be looking at energy efficiency and other alternatives to building a big, huge power plant. I think, we just haven't really seen that same level of attention on the gas system and whether it's a good idea to, lay this or replace this pipe. But we're starting to see utilities like People's Gas in Illinois launched a pipe replacement program to replace every pipe in the city. Program costs grew from 1.4 billion to as much as 11 billion between 2007 and 2015, really highlighting the need to think very, very carefully about big gas utility expansion projects and pipe replacement. So I think this is something that other states are looking to do and we'll see more of in the future. Thank you.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. So I just have, thank you for that information. I appreciate that. And so I just want, this is a new space for me. I turn my stove on, it goes click, 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 and my gas works. So this is very new. How long does a gas line function? So if we're going to lay a new gas line to a new development, how long can we expect that infrastructure to last? And then is it possible for the gas company to diversify its energy portfolio similar to the way that the electric company does now with renewable energy sources?
Chairman Moreno, through you to Assemblywoman Brown May, Dylan Sullivan, again for the record. The lifetime over which a gas pipe is depreciated, like from an accounting sense, is about I think 50 years. When I looked at the IRS tables a few weeks ago, the engineering lifespan can be 70 years. It can be longer than that. In terms of alternatives that gas utilities can invest in, I'll interpret your question as like, can gas utilities do the same thing NV Energy is doing, basically rely more on renewable energy and other alternatives? It's really more difficult. So there's something called renewable natural gas available on the market. It's actually biomethane. It's a type of methane molecule. So the same molecule as fossil natural gas. It's captured and collected from waste at landfills, livestock operations, sewage treatment facilities. NRDC's analysis shows that sustainable biomethane sources can only offset around 3 to 7% of total U.S. gas use. And biomethane's claimed climate benefits really depend on some accounting assumptions, and some of the accounting assumptions are pretty dubious. So I detail this more in NRDC's comment letter. So basically, because of the limited availability and also the high cost of biomethane, it's unlikely that it's going to be itself a transition strategy. And hydrogen made from renewable electricity will likely be like a really key energy carrier and storage technology in a low carbon world, but it's going to be best used where renewable electricity is not a great option. So for things like aviation, some heavy duty trucking applications, industrial process heat, using green hydrogen in homes and businesses to heat spaces and water, the things that we use gas for in our homes right now, using green hydrogen for that would be fantastically expensive and inefficient. Nevada would need to build like 5 to 6 times the amount of renewable power plants to serve heating needs with green hydrogen than if it served those needs with electric heat pumps powered by renewable energy. So there are alternatives, but the availability is limited and the cost is going to be a lot higher than conventional natural gas. And it's likely to be a lot higher than using clean Nevada electricity to power new electric technologies.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're so welcome. Thank you for the questions. Next up, we have Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I'm listening to everyone say, this isn't a natural gas ban, and looking at it, I'm reading it, and it seems to me that a couple of things. We have a stated goal of 0 emissions by 2050 for this state. So it seems to me that this is probably the first step in a natural gas ban is what I'm seeing here. But more importantly, it looks to me like, especially through section 19 here, that we're asking the gas companies to go to the PUC and say, okay, over the next 20 years, here's how we're going to cut our own throats. And can you tell me that this isn't the first step to a natural gas ban, given especially that 2050 stated goal of 0 emissions?
Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. I mean, I think, again, what we have to understand is that things are changing, the market's changing, how people are choosing to bring utilities into their home, what utilities they're going to use, right? Going electric, that type of thing is changing. So whether we, sorry, I'm getting bings on my computer, whether we move forward thinking that there are changes and we need to prepare for them, or we stick our head in the sand and just say, well, we just don't want to, rock the boat and give anyone a problem. That's kind of the big issue, because the changes are coming. Again, maybe not for 10 years or 20 years or 29 years, but it's still something that's coming, and that this state has said needs to happen because we did make these goals. And are we just making goals so we can go out and have a photo op, or does that mean something and that we're going to do something to get there? But with that, I'll see if Mr. Davis or Mr. Sullivan want to add anything.
Sure. Again, Kyle Davis for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair, to Assemblyman Wheeler. I guess I would just rephrase it a little bit that, what we're asking for here is for a process at the Public Utilities Commission to consider the state's future. So it's beyond any one utility, or what the responsibility is of the state to continue any utility's specific business model at the time. But it is asking the state to through our regulatory process to take a look at how we are going to plan for the future. And it's a couple of things, as the Assemblywoman just mentioned. Yes, this is a direction that the market is going, maybe not as fast right now, but it is likely to increase. So planning for that fact that people are going to electrify on their own because of improving technology. So we need to take that into account. But you're quite right. We also are taking into account the state's overall carbon reduction goals. This is a part of, planning for the future so that we can plan to reduce our carbon emissions. We certainly took a big step forward last session with the passage of the renewable portfolio standard and increasing that to 50% by 2030, with a goal of getting to 100% carbon free by 2050. That's the place that we're trying to get to in order to save off the worst effects of climate change. And so this is a planning process to figure out how to do that. Now, we want to set up a process that takes everything into account. So all of these ideas can be brought to the table. They can be considered. I expect that when you hear Southwest Gas speak later in this meeting, they're going to talk about some of the, we'll call them pipe alternatives that they have. And those should certainly be evaluated by the Public Utilities Commission, along with, electrification options and other things that we can do to reduce carbon emissions and sustainably move in this future. But these are all things that need to be evaluated because some may make sense, some may not.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick follow-up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, I hear what you're saying, but when the Assemblywoman says the market is changing, what I see here is we're changing the market with this bill. We're forcing a market change. That's, to me, we should stay out of things like that. It seems to me, that we're sitting here saying that we're going to take a viable product that is very low emissions and, we'll get rid of that. I guess we need a 28th Amendment for the right to keep and bear my gas stove. Thank you for your time.
Madam Chair, if I could just just respond quickly. Kyle Davis for the record. And I hear what you're saying, Assemblyman. The only thing that I would point out is that Nevada was one of the first states that adopted a renewable portfolio standard back in the early 2000s. And that portfolio standard was incredibly small at the time. It was less than 1%. And we all the way up to last session when this body passed, increased it to 50% by 2030 on a unanimous vote. Now, certainly at the time, there were those that said that, this is forcing the market, this is changing the market. But what it did is it allowed for that technology to develop. And now we're at a point where solar is the cheapest source of energy that we have in the state. So we certainly see opportunities in doing things like this. Now, we don't want to do something that's going to put people out on the street. Absolutely. We want to make sure that we, maintain a good process to do this. But there is advantage of investing in Nevada resources, in clean energy resources, and moving in that direction for the state, both economically and environmentally.
All right. I thought you might have a follow-up, Assemblywoman Wheeler. And I will move on to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chandra Summers Armstrong, Assembly District 6 for the record. Earlier it was, so we talked about infrastructure for gas. Can we talk about what it costs and the lifespan of an electric power plant and transformers and what we are looking at as far as replacement of those infrastructure items might be?
Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. I'll have my co-presenters address that.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Kyle Davis again for the record. My short answer is no, I don't know the exact costs on that. It obviously depends on the technology, depends on the size and everything like that. But I think the larger point there, and I don't know, certainly correct me if I'm wrong here, but just thinking about infrastructure in general, whether we're considering the costs of investing in new gas pipelines and a gas distribution system, or whether we're thinking about building new power plants, new transformers, new electric lines, no matter what those large infrastructure projects are, our belief is that they should be subjected to a resource planning process at the Public Utilities Commission. And that's what does happen right now with the electric utility, is that they do bring these types of projects forward. They come to the commission and say, here's what we'd like to do, with transmission planning, with building new power lines. In fact, we just saw that a few weeks ago where the Public Utilities Commission approved the Greenlink project in part. And they did that after the company made their case at the commission. They demonstrated that this was in the best interest of the ratepayers, that it was in the best interest of bringing new renewable energy online. And they went through that process. And so we believe that no matter what, whether we're talking about those types of big, expensive projects, but, evaluate them against the benefit to the ratepayers, or we're talking about gas infrastructure projects, that everything should be subject to such a process. And so that's what we're trying to set up with this bill, is that type of process.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick follow-up, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I guess, we've had several conversations, and I've voiced my concerns to you regarding the communities that I serve. And, I still have to be conscious of how this could affect my community. And so if we are going to a system where electric infrastructure is going to be more highly used, then we can also expect, right, that the infrastructure is going to wear out faster. And if it's going to wear out faster, then that's also going to affect when infrastructure projects have to be requested. Wouldn't that still affect the rates? Because the electric company would have the right to want to have payment back on that infrastructure. Is that correct?
Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. Well, but right now the electric company does have to go before the PUC. And if there's something that they're asking to have done that isn't necessarily in the best interest of the ratepayers, the PUC can say no. But we have the same issue with the gas utilities, right? If they decide they want to do a whole big new infrastructure program, or make repairs that aren't necessarily required, they don't have to go before the PUC. So, but again, this isn't about forcing it to happen. It's about considering that it is going to happen, and we need to start making these plans. But it's going to happen. I think the market is going to get us there. I think we're going to see those changes again, maybe far in the future, but shouldn't we start planning and thinking about it as opposed to just saying, no, we don't want to think about it because it's going to be difficult.
Chairman Romarino, through you to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. I think it's a great question. Basically, like how if we're going to be adding this new electricity demand eventually, what's going to be the costs of adding that, and how do we take that into account? I think the really important thing is that solar electricity has just plunged in price since I started working at NRDC in 2008. It's basically the cheapest power you can buy in America is solar power that is made in Nevada. And so we will, if this market takes off, we're going to be serving these new electric appliances in Nevada homes and businesses with really cheap solar electricity. And also, Nevada doesn't really produce any fossil fuels. We have to buy our fossil fuels from other states and other countries because, we don't produce any. So every year we spend about $1.4 billion sending money to other states to buy fossil fuels, when what we have here and what can create jobs here is Nevada's just really world-class solar resources. And when you run the numbers, what you find is that it's some of the cheapest electricity you can get in the country.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, you still look like you have a question.
I don't really have a question, Madam Chair. I thank you for acknowledging me, Shonda Summers Armstrong, for the record. I just think that it's just important to ask. I mean, I think we have to realize that infrastructure is going to be taxed. Some of us live in communities that still have wires above ground and transformers that are on poles. And when you're talking about increasing demand, there's going to be stress on those resources. And we are being encouraged through this legislation to consider processes that will convert our communities. But then when I'm asking about what about the provider of that resource to us and whether or not it's up to snuff to provide that power in an efficient and effective manner so that we don't have brownouts and blackouts and transformers that are already blowing up in our communities, I feel like I was kind of dismissed, and that's not the question is a valid question, and so I appreciate the answer, but I think that it requires an answer, and it requires an honest one, and it requires consideration. So thank you.
Chairman Romarino, through you to Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Go ahead, Mr. Sullivan, but I will need you to restate your name.
This is Dylan Sullivan for the record. Apologies. And Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question. And I think you bring up an important question, and I think that there, as we add more electric vehicles to the grid, as we add electric demands, we might need some more electric distribution system investment. But I think the important thing is that the state can compare the costs of that extra investment to the cost of continued investments in the gas system, and that's what can be allowed for in this bill and in the planning process that is articulated in the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for the answer. And going along the lines of Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, and if I'm incorrect, Assemblywoman, please correct me. I think the biggest concern that she was trying to stress is not so much the state's investment as we move forward, but the individual investment of the families that will be impacted. There's been a lot of conversation about disadvantaged communities, but I haven't really heard in the presentation how those disadvantaged communities are actually, what's the distinct plan of how they're going to make the adjustment. It was just a short time ago in Texas that we saw when their system kind of went haywire and they were relying on electricity. And a lot of families in that area were kind of left out in the cold, literally, because of some of the failures in their infrastructure. So I believe what the Assemblywoman was asking and addressing, how do families in her communities, how do those seniors, as we've given ourselves this goal, and all of us that were here last legislative session, we all voted unanimously to get to that goal. We did not give ourselves the blueprint or the plan of how we get there, but we also didn't address how those underserved, lower income senior communities are actually going to pay for it. We look at solar, and solar is great, but they're still in those communities, they don't have solar access. We're getting towards that. So I think what she was asking and what I would like to know, and I know what I've gotten emails on from my constituents, is exactly how they are going to pay for that. And what's that pathway for them, and moving to this direction that we've given ourselves, giving them a sense of security of the infrastructure that is in place and how they become a part of that. And if I was wrong in that, Assemblywoman, please let me know.
Thank you, Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. Right. And I certainly understand a concern, especially after what we saw in Texas. Although I think I can have Mr. Sullivan kind of explain why that's not something that we'd be looking at here because of differences in our system. But no, I get it. I do understand. And it's certainly something that we do have in the bill where there is a concern for different communities and making sure that those concerns are addressed, because we don't want to force anyone to make a change or to get rid of things when they're not ready for it. It's about that when they are ready for it, that there are programs available and that they can make that change. And that's one of the things we want the PUC specifically considering. So I don't necessarily have the answer as to how that change is made, but I do think that we should have the PUC, who are the experts in this field, at public hearings addressing these issues so that those steps can be formulated. Because I truly believe this, that the change is coming, and it's just not because of me, but because it's coming, because of the market, and because we know change comes, right? We know that technologies change. We know that the preferences of communities change. So we just want to make sure that when those changes come, that the same people we're talking about now and being concerned about aren't left behind. So let's, at those public hearings in front of the PUC, start to put the steps in place and the plan in place so that, again, if it's 20, 30 years from now, we're starting to figure out, well, what do we do with those homes? And, is it the plans that I think it was Mr. Sullivan talked about, might have been Mr. Davis, but about, that providing availability for getting different appliances through different resources where there's a lower cost. All of those types of things that were mentioned are a possibility, but we have to plan to get there. And with that, I'll just turn it over to the co-presenters in case they want to add something.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Kyle Davis. A couple of things, because I totally understand the points that you're making here. I mean, this is, nothing about this is, or there are easy answers that, that we can just give. And that's why we want to set up a process to really consider this over the next decade or 2 decades. I think it's important to consider when you're talking about like energy costs in a home and really how that's divided between, say electricity or gas, and how that might change. Obviously, those costs are going to be there either way. You're going to have bills every month. But the idea here is that as we make those changes, that we keep that we do what we can to keep those costs the same or even bring those down. As we decide where to put ratepayer dollars for infrastructure, whether we put that into new transformers or we put it into new pipes. I think I'm glad you brought up the issue of Texas, because we certainly watched that happen as well. I certainly share, the concern about making sure that we have the plans to provide, critical energy during natural disasters. But the lucky thing that we have here is that Nevada energy companies are much further ahead in planning for this, and they can really speak to the preparations. In fact, I know that this committee heard presentations on this earlier this session. It's worth noting that most natural gas appliances also require electricity to operate. And contrary to what some have said, a major factor for the recent Texas energy crisis was the failure of gas power plants and gas wells themselves. So the PUC places a high value on reliable service. That's really one of the main things that they do. And improving the planning process can just improve that oversight. In terms of cost for customers, I think customer cost is central to the planning process that is articulated in Section 16 and 19 of the bill. The gas utility needs to evaluate the utility infrastructure cost, the customer equipment cost, and the environmental and health costs of its plan and the alternatives. And the commission's directed to take that into account when they're making these decisions. And then finally, I'll certainly defer to the authors of the state climate strategy for specifics on what is in there and what they're envisioning. But I think it is important to understand that the strategy lays out a framework for policies to enable us to meet our climate goals, but it is on policymakers, regulators to really enact those policies. And that's what we're trying to do here today by at least setting up that planning process to get to those goals, knowing that there's a lot of decisions to be made along the way.
Thank you so much for that. I know we have one last member with a question, but before we go to that last member, I just also want to say that, you know, when we think of policies and the changes, and I agree with the Assemblywoman, we are moving in this direction. I don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, or how long down the road that we are moving in this direction. But oftentimes in our committee meetings, we hear conversations about the underserved communities and our seniors and low income. I think when we have these community conversations, we need to go into them thinking of the least of these and how it's going to affect the least of these. I hear a number of people talking about communities of colors and underserved, but then when the policies are actually put in place, those same communities are the ones left holding the bag or left out of the process. They're often the ones that are holding the jobs that will be disenfranchised or maybe shut down, but they're also some of the small business owners. So when we look at things, we're asking them to not just change out their homes, but they may have that small business that has to be changed out. So as we have these discussions in the future, always have the least of these in mind and make sure that those communities that we say we want to protect, we're not unfairly harming and leaving out of the conversation. Our final question will come from Assemblyman Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, and it really kind of echoes the sentiments of Chairman Moreno and Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, but I agree that we are moving in this direction and that proper planning is the best way for us to move there where we don't leave people behind. I guess, and maybe this is turning into more of maybe a comment than a question at this point, because I kind of think you addressed it. And that is just ensuring that we are in this planning, that we are also considering, the homes that are not able to, from age or different things like that, which could be across all communities that are not able to easily make these transitions, that we are making sure that in this study and in this planning that we're doing, that how the oldest homes are also going to be incorporated and things like that. So yeah, that, I mean, I think it was more of a statement because I do think that you addressed it a bit when you mentioned having the open hearings and things like that. But if you want to add any additional context, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Leslie Cohen, Assembly District 29. I'm certainly open to continue the discussion if we do need to make it more clear in the bill. It's been our intent that we always have the communities in mind. But with that, one of the things we're keeping in mind is also health issues, right? Because these same communities are also the ones that are most affected by smog and things like that, and the numbers of and having greenhouse gas issues with too much of that. And so in order to make sure that these communities are considered, we also do have to consider those health issues. And then as far as the older homes, I certainly do think it is something that needs to be considered, and that we do even, everyone thinks Las Vegas is being all brand new, but there are houses there that are, that are still up from the 40s, which I know isn't as old as some of the houses in other parts of the state, but it's, it is hard, it is old, and it is something that we need to consider. And again, I think that's one of the reasons that we do want to have this as part of a planning, as part of planning before the PUC, because that way it's public, people can come and put those issues forward and make sure that those issues are addressed, as opposed to just kind of going along and seeing where we're going to end up. So with that, I will just turn over to my co-presenters in case they have anything to add.
Chairman Moreno, through you to Assemblyman Miller. For the record, this is Dylan Sullivan. I think you brought up a really good point about older homes. Those are homes that are least likely to have like insulation and air sealing to be really tightened from the elements, and they probably use the most energy in both the summer and winter. And these homes really need to be a priority in program efforts. We have a bill over on the Senate side that one of the provisions in the bill is to double the low-income program spending requirement for NV Energy, so that they spend 10% of their program budget on programs that are specifically targeted to low-income households and historically underserved communities. Because as you mentioned, these are households that pay often a large portion of their income on energy bills, and they really need to be front and center in our attention. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I have no one else in line for questions. So seeing no other members wanting to ask a question, I will ask our broadcast staff if we have any callers that are in the queue wishing to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 380.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 380, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 549. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Sarah Steinberg. That's SARAH STEINBERG. I'm a policy principal with Advanced Energy Economy. AEE is an industry association comprised of businesses dedicated to making the energy we use secure, clean, and affordable. Today, I would like to note AEE's support for Senator Cohn's conceptual amendment to AB 380. Given all of the recent conversations in Nevada around the future of gas, AEE has thought hard about what we think is the best way to manage long-term infrastructure in an uncertain future. What's not uncertain is that the economics and technologies of our energy resources are shifting dramatically, and consumer preferences are changing in response. These trends require a re-examination of the way we plan our infrastructure investments so that we build what's necessary for safety and reliability, but avoid assets that are likely to become stranded and drive up ratepayer costs over the long term. If we don't plan carefully today to manage the transition that's already underway, we may face rising gas bills for consumers who maintain their appliances either by choice or because they do not have the means to renovate. A new gas utility planning process that mirrors some of the long-term planning that electric utilities undergo every 3 years can mitigate some of those challenges. With that in mind, AEE believes that what has been proposed in this conceptual amendment sets Nevada up for success. We see it borrowing some of the best practices from that electric utility resource planning process to ensure that approved gas infrastructure projects appropriately balance a number of important priorities that include cost, safety, reliability, flexibility, and environmental impact in the face of uncertainty about the future as it relates to changing gas demand, economic conditions, policies, and technologies in a way that the current processes do not allow for. I've submitted more extensive comments in writing that detail what AEE particularly likes about this proposed infrastructure supply and alternatives plans and investigatory docket, but thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 377. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chairman Moreno and members of the committee, my name is Jana Moan, JAINAMOAN, and I'm the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. We are a global organization conducting science-based on-the-ground conservation work to support our mission of conserving the lands and waters on which all life depends. Climate change is the biggest threat to this mission. As an organization, we are united in doing what we can to mitigate and adapt to climate change, and we support policies that will help us ensure global warming stays below 1.5 degrees C. We support AB 380 with the proposed conceptual amendment because it does just that. It establishes a goal for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the building sector and a mechanism of responsible planning to ensure that Nevada achieves the goal in a reasonable and equitable manner. Addressing the threat of climate change will have trade-offs. This is a fact. We need to confront these trade-offs head-on, and we believe AB 380 does exactly that. In our quest as a society to combat the existential threat of climate change, there will inevitably be unalterable changes to the natural gas and other fossil fuel industries and to the people whose lives and livelihoods depend on it. We cannot leave people behind. And at the same time, we have no choice but urgent action. Through responsible planning, through AB 380 with the proposed conceptual amendment seeks to ensure that no one is left behind, including the workforce and the disadvantaged populations that would be affected by this climate action. Nevada is a state like no other. We have incredible biodiversity of ecosystems in this state: sagebrush, deserts, springs, mountains, rangelands, forests. At the Nature Conservancy, we fear that we will lose it all if we do not take measured, responsible steps now to address climate change. We understand that this will mean difficult trade-offs, and we think that these can be best managed with bills like AB 380. Thank you, Assemblywoman Cohen, for bringing this bill forward. We stand ready to help. We urge the committee's support, and thank you for hearing the testimony.
Please send it in. Thank you so much. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 897. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chairman Moreno and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jasmine Vazine, Jasminevazin for the record, and I'm here today to represent the Sierra Club. On behalf of the Sierra Club and our more than 40,000 members and supporters statewide, we urge this committee to support AB 380. This bill will require gas companies to submit plans for approval to the Public Utilities Commission before building out expensive pipelines that will cost ratepayers money. It will ensure that future build-out of pipelines is in line with Governor Sisolak's Nevada Climate Initiative in order to protect our climate, our health, and the wealth of our communities. Methane gas, commonly known as natural gas, is a fossil fuel that emits pollutants in our air when it's extracted, transported, and burned. Burning methane gas has been regulated for the electric sector, but for many years, the gas distribution companies have not engaged in a robust planning process. This bill aims to solve that problem. As covered in the presentations today, the electric utility has engaged in a resource planning process at the Public Utilities Commission for decades, and this bill would bring about a similar resource planning process for the gas utility. AB 380 would require gas utilities to demonstrate that future spending is both economically and environmentally sound for their customers, which is critically important now, because the planning decisions made by utilities today will have a direct impact on the rates of their customers well into the future. There must be transparency as these conversations take place, which can be accomplished at the PUCN, which is an unbiased public agency aimed at protecting Nevadans' best interests, and they already manage a very similar regulatory process for NV Energy. This bill calls on gas utilities to plan for how they spend ratepayers' money and account for the impact that they have on Nevada's environment. It's a common sense solution as our state transitions to clean energy. For these reasons, the Sierra Club urges support of AB 380 as amended. Thank you for bringing this bill forward and considering this important piece of legislation.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller, and I will remind the callers that you each have 2 minutes.
Caller with the last three digits of 753. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the members of the committee. My name is Dr. Mary House, spelled Maryhouse. I am the President and CEO of CHR Inc. and the First Lady of Mountaintop Faith Ministries. I'm here today to support AB 380. There is no question that Nevada must transition away from burning methane gas, also known as natural gas, inside of our homes and our buildings, and to power more of our appliances with clean electricity from sources like solar. Some folks, including myself, are blessed enough to have already begun this transition. I'm in the process of replacing my gas stove with an electric induction range, and I am so excited about the new technology and the health, economic, and environmental benefits it's going to bring. But not everyone is so fortunate, And it's important that nobody gets left behind. That's why I support AB 380, which requires the Nevada Gas Utility Plan for the future. We simply cannot leave low-income families on the hook to pay for expensive gas system projects in which a few short decades because we didn't take the proper important steps now. To be clear, AB 380 is designed to protect low-income Nevadans. It will require gas utilities to look ahead and compare all the costs and benefits of business as usual with alternative options, including efficiency and electrification. Electric utilities already do this long-range plan. It is only fair that gas utilities do the same. So, Chairwoman, I am thanking you for this opportunity in advance to consider AB 380.
Thank you so much, Dr. House, for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 199. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tess Opferman. That's OPFERMAN, speaking on behalf of SEIU, the Nevada Chapter Local 1107. Our SEIU members support responsible energy planning and smart environmental measures to help Nevada reach our climate goal of 100% clean power and zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. A healthy, clean environment is important for all Nevadans. Thank you to Assemblywoman Cohen for her work bringing forward AB 380. This bill is an important step to help move toward Nevada's environmental goals while being conscientious of undue cost burdens on low-income and fixed-income residents. We urge your support on this measure, and thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us and for your comments. Next caller.
If you are just joining us, we are currently taking support testimony for Assembly Bill 380. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue if you wish to testify in support. Caller with the last three digits of 084. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. My name is Cynthia Moore, CINTHIAMOORE, and I'm calling. I'm the Las Vegas field organizer for Moms Clean Air Force and National Lead for Ecomadres, and we are strongly in support of AB 380, calling on behalf of our over 8,000 members. Methane gas is a harmful climate pollutant driving dangerous increases in smog and wildfires. In Nevada, we have seen the effects that wildfires have on our health and that of our children. When burned inside homes, methane releases carbon monoxide and other air pollutants that can lead to troubling health effects, especially for the most vulnerable Nevadans, such as children and seniors. Studies show that improperly vented gas appliances can create dangerous levels of indoor air pollution that can increase the risk of children experiencing asthma symptoms by as much as 42%. Latino children are 40% more likely to die from asthma attacks than that of their white counterparts. These statistics are especially troublesome for us as parents. And as a mom to a 3-year-old, I please urge you to support AB 380. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We have time for one more caller, and then we have one testimony that will be on Zoom.
Caller with the last three digits of 822. Please solely state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Moreno and members of the Assembly Growth and Infrastructure Committee. My name is Matt Rubin, MATTRUBIN. I'm an energy policy analyst for Western Resource Advocates. WRA is a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting the West land, air, and water. WRA supports Assembly Bill 380 and the conceptual amendment. AB 380 creates a framework similar to integrated resource plans that electric utilities submit every 3 years. An infrastructure supply and alternatives plan would require gas utilities to provide 30-year forecasts on demand, descriptions and details of planned investment and activities, alternatives, and a cost-benefit analysis between the proposed alternatives, investments, and activities. These planning activities are all included in electric utilities, our IRPs, to protect ratepayers from higher rates resulting from poor long-term planning decisions. AB 380 also provides the Public Utilities Commission with the ability to open an investigatory docket to examine how to limit the impacts on historically underserved communities and low-income households, as Nevada strives to achieve its policy of zero or near zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 and interim greenhouse gas emission reduction goals in 2025 and 2030. By further requiring gas utilities to demonstrate how their investments will impact greenhouse gas emissions, as well as historically underserved communities, Nevadans can better determine the holistic impact
30 seconds.
Infrastructure supply plans provide. Nevadans impacted by these plans would be able to provide their views by intervening in Public Utilities Commission dockets that address the plans filed by the gas utilities, similar to what is done in an electric utility IRP. WRA urges members of the committee to pass AB 380 and the conceptual amendment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for the other callers that have waited patiently to give your testimony and support, I am so sorry, but I will encourage you, if you have not already, please send in your written testimony. And we'll go to our last testimony and support, which will be by Zoom, and that will be Mr. Figueroa.
Thank you very much, Chair Monroe Moreno, Vice Chair Watts, and members of the committee. For the record, I am Ernest Figueroa, the consumer advocate. It's ERNEST-FIGUEROA. If the policy of the state, as outlined in the governor's climate initiative, is to eventually transition away from the use of natural gas by 2050, then it is imperative for economic reasons that natural gas resource planning be implemented so that natural gas utility customers are not left with billions of dollars in stranded assets when that time comes. A methodic and orderly approach, such as resource planning as outlined in this bill, is necessary to make sure our natural gas utilities upgrade and plan accordingly in line with the state's policy goals. I appreciate working with the bill sponsor and hearing our concerns on behalf of the residential ratepayers. I look forward to continuing work with the bill sponsor and stakeholders as amendments are proposed and considered. Thank you. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you so much for joining us. BPS, we will move to opposition, closing the testimony and support. Do we have any callers in the queue wishing to testify in opposition?
Testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 380. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 528. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Yes, for the record, my name is Barry Gold, Madam Chair, members of the committee, BARRYGOLD, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for AARP Nevada. AARP supports sustainable energy policies, but we also ask about the impact on energy bills and affordability as well as reliability. We have several concerns about AB 380. While we support utility planning and a robust dialogue on sustainability, we also believe the PUC should be allowed to do its job and not be micromanaged. Accelerating depreciation of natural gas assets could raise rates, and encouraging the use of additional electricity could also raise electric rates by requiring massive new investments in electric generation, transmission, and distribution. How much would this cost? How much would rates rise? Would reliability be impacted? Many older adults and lower income Nevadans currently rely on natural gas to heat their homes, cook, and to heat their hot water. It is cheaper to use natural gas to do this, and forcing them to use electricity could only increase the difficulties they may currently already have choosing between buying food and medicine or heating their homes. Many, if not most, older homes in lower income areas have natural gas, and this would create a huge burden for many of them to retrofit their homes, replace appliances, and then also have to pay more for electricity. I've heard it could cost about $9,000 per house to do that. These initiatives need further study before any legislative action is taken.
30 seconds.
AARP Nevada, on behalf of our 345,000 members across the state, oppose AB 380 due to reliability and affordability concerns. We should not be asking Grandma to rip out her hot water heater in her mobile home at great expense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Next caller in opposition.
Caller with the last three digits of 496. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Alexandria Dazlich, D-A-Z-L-I-C-H, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Nevada Restaurant Association. The Nevada Restaurant Association is in opposition to AB 380, which proposes to remove natural gas in commercial and residential buildings. Restaurants would suffer substantial repercussions if they are denied the ability to use natural gas in their everyday operations. It is vital that restaurants continue to use gas to cook particular types of food over a fire, as a chef's control over the intensity of heat directly affects the flavor of the food, whether it be flame-seared meats, charred vegetables, or using a traditional wok. Natural gas is necessary to our restaurants, and as basic as ingredients as spices that make up our favorite recipes. In addition, natural gas provides chefs and cooks optimum speed and efficiency, which affects the volume of customers a restaurant can serve. Natural gas is absolutely essential to the running of a restaurant, and our operators need our help more than ever to protect what remains of the restaurant industry as they begin to recover over the course of many years. The NVRA appreciates the intent behind the bill and are committed to taking steps to combat the effects of climate change. However, we believe that AB 380 goes too far. It is for these reasons that we are opposed today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 417. Please slowly state the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Jordan Cranebuhl, Jordan Krahenbuhl. I am the Executive Director of the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors of Nevada. The PHCC of Nevada is strongly opposed to AB 380 as submitted and as recently amended. Addressing the amendment starting with Section 3, beneficial electrification means converting energy source of customers' end use from non-electrical fuel source to an effective electric source. Sections 5.1, 15C, 16.4B, 17C, 19 Part 2 all refer to using less gas and electrification. Section 22 repeals NRS for expansion. Any legislation submitted or amended that would prohibit or limit the use of natural gas would be devastating to our industry, business owners, homeowners, and would cost many jobs across the state. Also, requiring homeowners and businesses to convert to non-gas appliances not only would be costly in regards to the equipment, but also in many cases require electric service and panel upgrades. Many would simply not be able to afford this. The question that has been asked many times today and has never been addressed is who is going to pay for this, including not just low income, but middle income families and businesses. The elimination of natural gas through AB 30 or any other bill is not in the best interest of the homeowners, businesses, and citizens of Nevada.
30 seconds. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 000. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Monroe Moreno and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Doug Cannon, Dougcannon, and I'm President and CEO for NV Energy. Our company provides electric service to 1.3 million electric customers statewide and gas service to 175,000 customers in northern Nevada. The decarbonization of our energy grid is one of NV Energy's highest priorities. In fact, since 2005, we've reduced our carbon emissions by close to 55%. During that same time, NV Energy customers have benefited from some of the largest rate decreases that have been seen across the country. Today, in fact, our customers' rates in Nevada are at or below what they paid in 2009. Decarbonization, when done through a deliberate and fact-driven process, can be done without increasing customer rates. NV Energy supports our state's efforts to continue decarbonization, and it is critically important that these efforts be done in a balanced and deliberate manner in order to avoid negative impacts on energy reliability and price. NV Energy is committed to advancing Nevada's decarbonization goals, and supports the state's desired clean energy and technology revolution outlined in Governor Sisolak's State of Nevada Climate Initiative. As the legislature considers additional ways to decarbonize our economy, automobile tailpipe emissions are the largest remaining emitter of carbon, and we look forward to working with you to electrify our transportation sector across the state. It is an exciting opportunity. The topic at hand today, natural gas resource planning, is yet another opportunity to benefit our environment and our economy. NV Energy has participated in the integrated resource planning process for decades for our electric business. It is this very process that has allowed our electric business to achieve significant carbon emission reductions and bring more renewable energy to Nevada. We support the philosophy that natural gas service can also benefit from resource planning. The process that exists today for electric utilities allows all stakeholders to participate in the assessment of the costs and benefits of all alternatives.
Mr. Buchanan, can you hear me? Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. I can now. I apologize.
If you can send your comments to us in writing, that would be wonderful, but we're at our time limit. I apologize, but thank you so much for calling in.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more caller by phone, and then the next callers will be by Zoom.
Caller with the last three digits of 461. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Moreno and committee members, Carrie Kramer, KERRIEKRAMER, with our Argentine partners on behalf of NAOP. We would like to thank the Assemblywoman for continuing to speak with us and working toward a solution on this bill. Unfortunately, at this time, even considering the amendment, NAOP is opposed. While we understand the need to look at ways to address climate change, the need for natural gas and commercial development remains necessary and will long into the future. Again, we would like to thank Assemblywoman Cohen for continuing to work with us and look forward to working with her in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Now we will move to our testimony that is on Zoom, and we will start with Mr. Hess, and I apologize, but we're only 2 minutes. So, John, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is John Hester. I'm President and CEO of Southwest Gas. I'm also a proud resident of Nevada for over 30 years. In short, we oppose this legislation. Legislation creates an incremental gas utility planning process to facilitate a move away from natural gas appliances and conversion to electricity. The goal is pretty obvious if you read the third sentence in the legislation to learn the definition of beneficial electrification. Beneficial electrification is somewhat of a misnomer in a state like Nevada, where approximately 70% of our electricity is generated with natural gas. Natural gas has also supported the expansion of intermittent renewable resources like wind and solar. That said, the most efficient use of natural gas is through direct use in natural gas appliances. As mentioned earlier, the company has supported economic development in Nevada, as seen in the communities of Mesquite and Spring Creek. We're currently investing approximately $100 million pursuant to extensive plans that we filed with the PUCN. Any suggestion in this hearing today that the company is not one of the most highly regulated businesses in Nevada, that's subject to the regulation of the Public Utility Commission in Nevada, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the Department of Transportation, and others, is just not accurate. Every single dollar that's reflected in customer rates in Nevada is extensively reviewed by the Public Utility Commission in Nevada. And we also file annual planning reports with the commission to let them know what our plans for growth are for the future. That said, the average bill for a customer in Southern Nevada from Southwest Gas is $40. I really appreciate the concern for affordability for customers. We also are working to pivot our business to new sources of energy. As was mentioned earlier, renewable natural gas, hydrogen, energy efficiency, and supplies that come with offsets. So we are fully supportive of taking efforts in energy efficiency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but we also are very concerned about the needs of our customers here in Nevada.
Thank you so much for joining us and your patience, and thank you for your comments. We truly appreciate it. Next up, we have Mr. Brill.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tom Brill, B-R-I-L-L, of Council at Greenberg Traurig, and I'm here to testify in opposition to and also to provide technical expertise on Assembly Bill 380. I have reviewed several versions of AB 380, including 2 sets of amendments over the past 5 days. While the appearance of the bill has changed, each version has had one thing in common. It presumes that the best strategy for reducing emissions in the natural gas sector is through electrification. Unfortunately, the bill does not ask the PUC to take a neutral look at the future. The problem with the current language of AB 380 is that electrification would be assumed to be beneficial without considering several factors, including the upfront cost of electrification, the higher natural gas rates that would be imposed on customers who cannot afford to electrify and would be required to pay a higher share of the utility's fixed costs as a result of electrification, the carbon intensity of natural gas and the carbon intensity of the electricity that would replace it, the potential value of natural gas infrastructure for facilitating emission reductions in other sectors, the potential need for natural gas infrastructure to ensure future electric reliability in a renewable-dominated electricity grid, and other potential ways to reduce carbon emissions in the natural gas industry that would not have adverse impacts on consumers. I would like to amplify on a few of the things that have not been considered
30 seconds.
in determining electrification to be beneficial. Today, when renewable natural gas or biomethane is produced from the right biogenic feedstocks, it can significantly reduce emissions in other sectors such as the agriculture, dairy, or other industries. When I say this, I'm not talking about a fuel with zero emissions like electricity from renewable generation. I mean negative life cycle emissions. And when this renewable natural gas is used in the transportation industry, it also helps reduce emissions in that sector. All of these opportunities should be considered by the Commission without a thumb on the scale in favor of electrification. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brill. And I must tell you that you are the winner today for backgrounds, just so you know. The room is awesome. So we'll go to our last person on Zoom. That will be Mr. Guzman.
Thank you, Chairwoman Moreno, for allowing me to testify, and thank you to each and every one of you for all your hard work. The Latin Chamber of Commerce, with over 45 years in the community, really represents the following groups: business, community, and entrepreneurs, everyday hardworking folks that include lower income and middle class, and our elders. And I assure you, we have heard from all three regarding choice in energy. The business community, including restaurants, who employ many of the people that we talk about protecting, have spoken loudly and cannot even imagine not having the choice of clean energy, natural gas. They have stated that it will absolutely affect jobs and their business, and this will have a detrimental effect on these folks. We have heard from our everyday hardworking Hispanic folks who have loudly said they are worried about losing their choice of low-cost natural gas to heat their homes and cook their family meals. And from our abuelas and abuelitos, which is our grandma and grandpas, many on fixed incomes, they've stated loudly that they enjoy the choice of affordable, clean, natural gas for their homes. We know that eliminating energy choice will eliminate jobs. We need more affordable energy choices. When we talk about the 7,000 miles of laying pipe that was mentioned, that is 7,000 miles worth of jobs. What we need is more innovative collaborations, and this will lead to more jobs, which we know is needed. Lastly, to the thousands of Southwest Gas employees, many that I've gotten to meet through this journey, a company that has been in our community for over 90 years, I might add. We know so many people are out of work right now, but I want to address them. I feel I must point out that with good paying jobs, you have paid taxes, volunteered in all aspects of our community, and have helped make Las Vegas and Nevada a better place. Hold your heads up high, knowing that your work of delivering affordable clean energy choice is much appreciated. And then lastly,
thank you so much, Mr. Guzman.
Thank you, no problem. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. And I apologize to all of the other callers that are on the line. I encourage you to send your written testimony in to us. And then, and we can all just, hate Assemblywoman Cohen. This was a really great bill with a great discussion, and the questions were necessary. But unfortunately, we have a hard stop today for this committee. We have to finish at 4 so members can go off to other committees. We will roll the bills that were not heard today to Thursday and Friday. And yes, committee, we were only going to have a work session on Friday, but it's not looking that way now. So I apologize for those of you that joined us today for the other bills on our agenda. And I hope my staff will reach out to you within the next 24 hours to let you know when the bills will be rescheduled. And with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 380. Neutral. Do we have anyone in neutral? I am so sorry.
To testify in the
BPS,
neutral position.
Neutral.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 380, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 635. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, Chair and elected officials, businessmen. I respect your time. Some of you guys did a good job that are going against it. They used their time very well. And I only heard one of them use this word that starts with an H, and it's called hydrogen. You guys should look into hydrogen vehicles as opposed to electric vehicles. Hydrogen is the wave of the future. You should look into Tesla's failure rates. And I have tried contacting my Nevada state public offices about their failure rates and our highest insurance rates in America. And so, those high cars, which are failing, are costing us a lot of money. It's not a good thing when NASA says we're the brightest place on Earth, because you guys need to think about all this electricity that's going to all these casinos, and you guys are talking about electric. It's like, where all this power going to come from? And why do you guys want to water grass? Why do you want to use our water to make grass in Summerlin? That's not good. And look into the solar panels that are being built in China. We don't want any more China. And look into electrical transformers that are being found with extra technology that's coming from China.
30 seconds.
I don't want to go over my time, but basically, and you need to look into, you talk about the minority community, you need to watch out for illegal immigrants taking our jobs. When you say
Thank you so much for your comments today. Caller, can I get your name? You failed to give us your name at the beginning of your testimony. Can I get your name? Well, thank you so much for joining us. And if you call in again, we will cut you off if you do not give your name. But thank you so much for joining us. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 059. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Kristen Averett, State Climate Policy Coordinator, KRISTENAZERYT. On behalf of the Nevada Climate Initiative, I am testifying neutral on AB 380. Natural gas is a fossil fuel. When it's burned, whether at power plants or directly in our homes and businesses, it releases carbon dioxide. In our state, 45% of our total greenhouse gas emissions come from burning natural gas. Given the significant contribution of gas to the state's greenhouse gas emissions profile, and based on what we currently know, it will be necessary to transition from natural gas across all sectors in order to achieve Nevada's net zero emissions target. The topic of natural gas was contemplated in the state climate strategy that was released last year. As it relates to natural gas and AB 380, the state climate strategy states the following. Number 1, in order to meet Nevada's long-term goal of zero emissions, transitioning away from natural gas is necessary. Number 2, Burning gas ovens can compromise indoor air quality and the health of families and those working in commercial kitchens. 3, a phased transition from gas in the residential and commercial sectors will require careful planning and engagement. 4, a potential first step in a phased transition from gas would be to allow consumers the choice between gas and electric on existing buildings. 5, before eliminating natural gas as a fuel source, consumer choice, affordability, and equity should all be carefully considered. The intent of AB 380 is consistent with the state climate strategy in that it addresses the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from natural gas in order to meet our state's 2050 net zero emissions target. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your comments. Do we have any other callers in neutral?
Caller with the last 3 digits of 094. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is David Bobzien. The last name is spelled Bobzien, and I serve as the Director of the Governor's Office of Energy for Governor Steve Sisolak. You will find on Nellis my letter of neutral testimony on this legislation, essentially connecting the bill's core concept of integrated resource planning for direct use of gas to a recommendation that is in the state climate strategy. I do also want to quickly note a couple of the technical issues about alternatives for natural gas that were discussed previously. There was some conversation about renewable natural gas as a possible path forward for gas distribution. I would note that while this legislature has been supportive and we are watching this effort, renewable natural gas was not considered in the state climate strategy because, according to the company's own filings, Southwest Gas's own filings with the PUC, the current goal for displacement of the gas supply for direct use is 3% by 2035. We do see, though, some opportunity with green hydrogen. Hydrogen is mentioned in the state climate strategy. I'm proud to report that I serve as the co-chair of the Western Green Hydrogen Initiative. So we're very active in the investigation of green hydrogen's applications for heavy industrial transportation as a storage medium, et cetera. There is some question as to the future ability to use this in the direct use context, whether or not it can be blended. I think the point was made earlier, though, that economically it probably won't happen. Nonetheless, we look forward to working with the company on these alternatives, and we would certainly be participating in an investigatory docket should this bill move forward, directing the PUC to open one. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Do we have any other callers calling in neutral?
Chair, we have no other callers wishing to testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 380 at this time.
Thank you so much. So with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 380. Assemblywoman Cohen, do you have any final comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and I'll make it very brief. And thank you very much for the hearing and for the very good conversation. We're facing a climate crisis, one that will primarily affect those not watching or participating in this hearing. Confronting this crisis won't be easy, but our choices are harder because for decades, too many of us chose to do nothing. And every day that we fail to do action, we leave harder and worse decisions for the next generation. Planning for the future will help make those decisions easier, smarter, more predictable for everyone. The proposal doesn't force anyone to change anything, but it does ask us to look at where we're headed, where we want to go, and for us to choose wisely. So I urge your support for AB 380 because this is an issue we can't ignore any longer. Please feel free to contact me with any further questions, any other information that you need. And again, I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the interesting dialogue today. And with that, we'll close the hearing on Assembly Bill 380. And members, that takes us to the last item on our agenda for today, unfortunately, which will be public comment. And I will ask our broadcast staff if we have anyone in the waiting room for public comment.
To offer public comments, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 704. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, this is Annette Kerr, ANNETTEKERR. As a homeowner in the underserved community of Spring Creek, Nevada, I believe it is important our Nevada lawmakers do not impede the progress we have made as an individual community to bring an additional resource like natural gas, which is affordable and energy efficient. Spring Creek, Nevada is a growing community with almost 15,000 residents and is a master plan for over 30,000 residents. Economic development is vital now and for our future growth. Being able to give residents in the community options in regards to this infrastructure is imperative as we all move towards a sustainable future. You are known as the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Please don't destroy all of the hard work we've done over the past few years. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 635. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, Ms. Chair. My deepest apologies for not doing that the right way. My name is JC John, and then my last name is Carlo, and I am calling from Vegas. But I do want to talk to you guys because you guys need to look into hydrogen vehicles and investing into hydrogen at gas pumps, because hydrogen takes less time to refuel than electrical cars, and they're less combustible, and hydrogen's not harmful to your health. But when you guys keep talking about electric cars, you guys are talking about lithium batteries, and lithium batteries are still going to be manufactured in some factory, which is still going to cause pollution. So you guys, there's never going to be 100% trying to say, we're recycling. But what I'm trying to tell you guys, do not water the grass in Summerlin. Why would you guys try to use our water that way? I think we could use it better, and recycling in the public schools is like, why hasn't no one ever thought about all the paper that they have used in the past? But we need to do a whole bunch of stuff. But thank you guys so much for your help, and thank you to the businessmen who really are trying to fight for American jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for calling back in with your name. Next caller.
Here, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no further callers at this time.
Thank you so much for that. Members, that brings us to the end of today's meeting. And as I said, the other bills that were supposed to be heard today will be rolled to Thursday and Friday. Our staff will reach out to the bill sponsors and the presenters to let them know exactly what day that they will be scheduled. I apologize, but we did have a very important bill with a lot of dialogue, and I didn't anticipate it to go as long. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you all on Thursday at the call of the chair. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.